The year is 2012, a Tuesday in October. The light is thin, golden. Frank Miller sits at his kitchen table. He is 74 years old. His hands are thick with arthritis, but they are clean. He hasn't worked the soil in 15 years, not since he retired as manager of the Ag Pro Co-op, a position he held for 31 years. Frank is a good man. Everyone in the valley would tell you so. Coached Little League for a generation, served on the church vestry, helped more farmers get loans than any man alive. He sips his coffee. It is weak, just how he likes it. He flips a page in the magazine, Global Agriculture Today, a glossy trade journal, full of articles on GPS-guided tractors and futures markets. He usually just looks at the pictures, but a small headline catches his eye. A sidebar on page 42. The Pearl of Okayama, an American kuromame. He reads the first line. In the world of high-end Japanese cuisine, few ingredients are as prized as the Tanaka black soybean. Frank stops. He knows that name. He reads it again. Tanaka. He squints at the small photograph. A field of green plants. A man standing in the middle of them. The face is older now, lined by sun and time. But he knows the eyes. Kenji Tanaka. Frank's breath catches, a small, tight knot in his chest. He continues reading. The article talks about flavor profiles, notes of chestnut and dark chocolate. It talks about texture, a perfect, resilient skin that never bursts when simmered. It talks about demand, a waiting list of 3 years for Michelin-starred chefs in Tokyo. And then it talks about price. $80 a pound, wholesale. Frank puts the magazine down on the table. The number hangs in the air. $80. He thinks about the price of commodity soy, the price listed on the big board at the co-op that morning. $13.50 a bushel. 60 pounds for $13.50. Kenji Tanaka gets $80 for 1 pound. Frank feels something he can't quite name. It isn't anger. It isn't jealousy. It's something colder. Something that feels like the echo of a profound mistake. He picks the magazine back up. His eyes find one last detail at the bottom of the article. A quote from a Tokyo importer. "We were lucky. We secured a 20-year exclusive contract with Mr. Tanaka in 2008. He is a master. He sells every bean he can grow." Frank closes the magazine. The silence in his kitchen is total. He remembers a different day, a different conversation. A young man with the same eyes, standing in his office, a small paper bag of black beans in his hand. Frank remembers his own voice, kind, patient, certain. He remembers saying the words, "Son, I can't sell these. There's no market for them. You're going to lose this farm." This channel tells the stories of people like Kenji Tanaka, the ones who were told no, the ones who were written off, the ones who proved the world wrong by quietly, stubbornly doing the work. These are the stories you won't find anywhere else. The stories of quiet triumph. If you believe these stories matter, hit that subscribe button. Join us. Because what happened to Kenji after that day in the office, it's a lesson in what can grow from rejection. It's a story about the dirt and how sometimes the dirt is enough. Let's go back to 1992, the year Kenji's father died, a heart attack at 51. Worn out by debt and drought, the farm was 160 acres, left to Kenji. He was 24 years old. He had a degree in agronomy from the state university. He knew about chemical inputs. He knew about hybrid seeds. He knew about maximizing yield per acre. He knew everything they taught, and he knew it wasn't working. The farm was drowning in debt. The bank owned more of it than he did. His father had followed all the rules. He'd planted what the co-op told him to plant. Corn one year, soy the next. He'd bought the recommended fertilizers, the patented seeds. He'd worked from sunup to sundown, and he died broke. Kenji walked the fields that spring. The soil was hard, compacted, lifeless. He knew he had one season, one chance before the bank took everything. One night, he was in the attic, going through his father's things. He found a wooden chest. Inside were his grandfather's journals. Issei, first generation. He had come from Okayama, Japan, in 1920. He had bought this land, this same dirt. The journals were filled with elegant vertical script, Japanese characters Kenji could barely read. But tucked in the back of one journal was a small seed packet, made of waxed paper, faded blue ink on the front, a single word, kuromame, and inside, a handful of small, black, glossy beans. His grandfather had brought them from the old country. For decades, he had grown a small patch, just for the family, for the New Year's celebration of Osechi Ryori, a tradition. His father had stopped growing them 10 years ago, said there was no time for it, no money in it. Kenji held the beans in his palm. They felt like polished stones. He went back to the journals. Using a dictionary, he slowly translated his grandfather's notes. The old man wasn't just a farmer. He was a scientist, a poet of the soil. He wrote about the moon, the tides, the way the beans tasted different if you planted them next to chamomile. He wrote about making his own compost, fish emulsion, kelp tea. He wrote about cover crops, deep-rooted vetch to break up the hardpan, clover to fix nitrogen. He never mentioned chemical fertilizer, not once. He described the beans as having a spirit, a memory. He wrote one line that Kenji would never forget. The bean remembers the soil it came from. A decision formed in Kenji's mind. It was a crazy idea, a desperate gamble. He wouldn't plant corn. He wouldn't plant commodity soy. He would take the 5 acres behind the house, the best soil on the farm, and he would plant these beans. His mother begged him not to. She had seen what struggle looked like. She wanted him to be safe, to sell the farm, get a job in the city. He just showed her the journal. He said, "I have to try this." He spent the spring preparing the soil, exactly as his grandfather had written. He spread compost he made himself. He planted the cover crops and tilled them in. He didn't use a single drop of store-bought fertilizer. The neighbors watched him. They shook their heads. "He's lost his mind," they said. "He's planting weeds." That summer, the plants grew. They were not as tall as the hybrid soy in the next field, but their leaves were a deeper green. Their stalks were thicker. He weeded by hand every day. The work was brutal, back-breaking, lonely. In the fall, he harvested. The yield was small, pathetic by modern standards, just over 800 pounds from 5 acres. But the beans were perfect, flawless, like black pearls. He cleaned them, sorted them by hand. He put a small sample in a paper bag, and he drove to the Ag Pro Co-op to see Frank Miller. Frank's office was paneled in dark wood. Trophies from the Little League teams he'd coached lined a shelf. He was a big man, a kind face. He had known Kenji since he was a boy. He had been a pallbearer at Kenji's father's funeral. He greeted Kenji with a warm, sad smile. "Kenji, good to see you, son. How are you holding up?" "I'm okay, Mr. Miller." Kenji placed the small bag of beans on the desk. "I'd like to sell these through the co-op." Frank opened the bag. He poured a few beans into his palm. He rolled them around with his thumb. "They're beautiful," he said. "Never seen anything like them. What are they?" "Kuromame," Kenji said. "A Japanese black soybean. An heirloom." Frank nodded slowly. He looked at Kenji. His eyes were full of genuine concern. "Son," he said. His voice was gentle. "I've been in this business for 20 years. We sell two things here, corn and soy. Number 2 yellow corn, Roundup-ready soybeans. We sell them by the ton, by the truckload. This," he gestured to the beans in his hand. "This is a novelty. It's a garden crop." Kenji's jaw tightened. "The quality is exceptional, the flavor." Frank held up a hand. "I'm sure it is, son. I believe you. But there's no market for it, no infrastructure. The combines aren't set up for it. The silos aren't equipped for it. I can't get you a good price. I couldn't get you any price." Kenji stood his ground. "What if I sold them myself? Could I use the co-op's network?" Frank leaned back in his chair. He sighed. It was the sigh of a man who had seen too many young farmers fail. "Kenji, your father was a good man, a good farmer. He worked hard. He did everything right. And he still couldn't make it work with commodity crops. You think you can make it work with this?" He picked up a single black bean. "This won't save you. It will bury you. The input costs are too high for the yield. The labor is too intensive. You need to be realistic. Plow those beans under. I can get you a loan for some proper seed soy. We can get a crop in before it's too late. I'm trying to help you keep your farm. Have you ever been told you couldn't do something? Not by an enemy, not by a rival, but by someone who genuinely believed they were protecting you. Someone who saw your dream as a danger, your ambition as a mistake. It's a different kind of rejection. It doesn't fuel you with anger. It fills you with a quiet, lonely doubt. Because their certainty is so absolute, their kindness so disarming. What do you do in that moment? How do you fight a battle against someone who thinks they are on your side? Drop a comment below and tell us about a time someone's well-meaning advice was the biggest obstacle you ever faced. Because Kenji Tanaka didn't argue. He didn't raise his voice. He just looked at Frank Miller. Across the wide, polished desk, he saw the kindness in the man's eyes. He saw the certainty. And he knew he was utterly alone. He spoke softly. "I understand, Mr. Miller." He took the bag of beans off the desk. "Thank you for your time." He walked out of the office, out of the co-op. He didn't look back. He drove home in silence. The weight of Frank's words pressed down on him. Maybe he was right. Maybe this was a fool's errand, a childish dream based on an old man's journal. He walked into the farmhouse. His mother was at the kitchen table. She saw his face. She didn't need to ask what happened. He sat down. He felt the fight go out of him. "Frank thinks I'm crazy," he said. "He said I should plow it all under." His mother listened. She was a small, quiet woman. She had endured internment camps as a child. She had endured the loss of her husband. She understood the difference between a real threat and a perceived one. She didn't say a word. She stood up. She went to the old wooden chest in the living room. She took out his grandfather's journal, the one he had been reading. She brought it to the table. She opened it to a specific page. Her finger, wrinkled and sure, pointed to a line of characters. The same line Kenji had seen before. But she read it aloud. Her voice was soft, but steady as a rock. "The bean remembers the soil." She looked at him. Her eyes were clear. She said, "The co-op does not own the soil. The bank does not own the memory in the seed. You do what your grandfather taught you." That was all she said. It was enough. The doubt evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. The world had told him no. His family had told him yes. He knew which voice to trust. Let me tell you what happened next, because this is where the story turns. This is the part about the work. Kenji knew he couldn't rely on anyone, not the co-op, not the banks, not his neighbors. He had to build his own system, from the ground up. He had 800 pounds of priceless beans and no way to sell them. He took 100 pounds for seed for the next year. The other 700 pounds he had to move. He started small. He packaged the beans in simple brown paper bags with a label he designed himself. Tanaka Farms Kuromame. He drove to the city, 2 hours away. He went to the small Japanese and Korean markets in the international district. Shop owners who were old enough to remember what real kuromame tasted like. The first grocer laughed at him. "Too expensive," he said. "Nobody will pay this." The second one was skeptical. The third, an old woman named Mrs. Kim, picked up a bean. She studied it. She knew. She bought 10 pounds. A week later, she called him. She needed 20 more. Her customers were asking for them. They said they tasted like home. That was the beginning. It was a trickle, not a flood. He sold the whole harvest that winter, bag by bag. He made just enough money to pay the property taxes and buy fuel for his ancient tractor. He had survived. That was a victory. The next year, he planted 10 acres. He hired no one. He did it all himself. His only help came from an unexpected place. Gus Peterson, an old Swedish farmer from down the road. Gus was nearly 80. He had known Kenji's grandfather. One day, Gus pulled his dusty pickup truck into Kenji's yard. He saw Kenji struggling to build a drying rack for the beans. He watched for a few minutes. Then he got out of his truck. "Your grandfather helped my father buy seed in '34, the Dust Bowl year. No papers, just a handshake. My father never forgot it." Gus pointed to a rusty piece of equipment in the back of his truck. "That's a 1950s-era seed cleaner, a clipper, made for small batches. Been sitting in my barn for 40 years. It's yours." Kenji tried to pay him. Gus just waved his hand. "Don't argue with an old man. Just make sure those beans are as good as your granddad's were." The seed cleaner was a miracle. It saved Kenji hundreds of hours of work. It was a piece of the past, helping him build a future. The community remained split. Most of the other farmers kept their distance. They saw his methods as backwards, inefficient. "He's not a real farmer," they'd say at the diner. "He's a gardener." They saw him on his hands and knees, hand-weeding his rows, while they sat in air-conditioned cabs, spraying herbicides. They saw his fields of clover and vetch in the off-season. They called it a waste of good land. Frank Miller would drive past on his way to the co-op. He'd see Kenji's small operation, and he would feel a pang of pity. Poor kid, he's working himself to death for nothing. He had no idea what was really happening. He saw the surface, the struggle. He didn't see the soil. With every passing year, Kenji's soil was getting richer, darker, more alive. The earthworms returned. The microbial life flourished, while the surrounding farms saw their soil erode, becoming more dependent on chemicals each year. Kenji's soil was healing. The bean remembers the soil, and this soil was becoming unforgettable. The breakthrough came in 1997, 5 years after he started. It came not from a buyer or a distributor, but from a traveler, a young Japanese food blogger named Emmy. She was writing a book about finding authentic Japanese flavors in America. She was visiting Seattle, and she happened to wander into Mrs. Kim's small grocery store. She saw the simple brown bag, Tanaka Farms Kuromame. She bought a pound, out of curiosity. That night, In her hotel room, she cooked them, the way her grandmother had taught her. Slowly, with care. She took one bite, and she was transported back to her childhood, to New Year's Day in her grandmother's kitchen in Okayama. The flavor was that pure, that perfect. She wrote a blog post about it that night. She called it a miracle in the American heartland. She wrote that she had found a kuromame that was not just as good as the best in Japan, but better. She wrote that the farmer was a kind of artist, a custodian of a lost treasure. Her blog was not famous in America, but in Japan it was read by everyone who cared about food. Chefs, importers, restaurateurs. Within a week, Kenji's phone started ringing. The calls were from Japan. He couldn't understand most of what they were saying. Then, one day, an email arrived. It was from a man named Mr. Sato, the president of a century-old food import company in Tokyo, Sato & Sons. The email was brief. It said, "I am very interested in your beans. I will be there in 3 days." Kenji thought it was a joke. 3 days later, a black town car pulled into his gravel driveway. A man in an immaculate dark suit got out. Mr. Sato. He was in his 60s. He had an interpreter with him. He did not want to see the farmhouse. He did not want to talk business. He said, "Please, show me the soil." Kenji took him to the 5-acre field where it all began. Mr. Sato knelt down. He picked up a handful of the dark earth. He crumbled it in his fingers. He brought it to his nose and inhaled deeply. He closed his eyes. He nodded slowly. He understood everything in that moment. The years of compost, the cover crops, the absence of chemicals. He understood his grandfather's journal without ever having read it. Then he walked through the rows of bean plants. He plucked a single raw bean from a pod. He split it with his thumbnail, examined the inside. He placed it on his tongue for a moment. Then he turned to Kenji. The interpreter spoke. "Mr. Sato would like to purchase your entire harvest." Kenji was stunned. "The whole thing?" "Yes, and he would like to offer you a contract. For the next 5 years, he will buy everything you can produce, at a fixed price." The interpreter named the price. It was 10 times what Kenji had been getting from the small markets. It was a number that would wipe out all his debt. In a single year. Kenji felt his knees go weak. He looked at the small, serious man in the suit. He looked at his fields, at the dirt. He thought of Frank Miller. He thought of the neighbors who laughed at him. He thought of his mother's steady voice. He took a deep breath, and he said yes. This is where the story accelerates. This is where the quiet work begins to compound, like interest in a bank account. But the currency was soil and respect. The first 5-year contract was signed in 1997. Cash. Kenji paid off the farm, every penny. The bank no longer owned a single inch of it. He bought a new, reliable tractor. Cash. He repaired the roof on the old barn. Cash. He didn't take vacations. He didn't buy a fancy truck. He put every dollar back into the land. By 2002, the contract was up. Mr. Sato flew in again. He did not try to negotiate the price down. He offered to double it. And he offered a new contract for 10 years. He asked Kenji if he could expand, produce more. Kenji said yes, but not in the way Mr. Sato expected. The neighboring farm went bankrupt that year, the one owned by a man who had called Kenji a gardener. He had been growing commodity soy. The prices had collapsed. The bank foreclosed. Kenji bought all 40 acres. Cash. Frank Miller heard about the sale at the co-op. He shook his head. What's he going to do with more land? He can barely manage what he has. But Kenji didn't plant a single bean on that new land. For 3 solid years, he planted nothing but cover crops: buckwheat, vetch, clover, rye. He was healing the abused soil, restoring what the chemicals had stripped away. He was building a foundation. The farmers at the diner called him crazy all over again, letting 40 acres of prime bottomland go to weeds. They didn't understand. He wasn't farming acres, he was farming soil. In 2005, he finally planted kuromame on the new parcel. The yield was staggering. The quality was even better than the original plot. The bean remembers the soil, and this new soil was singing. By 2008, the 10-year contract was nearing its end. This time, Mr. Sato's son Kenichi flew in. He was young, Harvard-educated. He spoke perfect English. He came with a proposal. He said, "Mr. Tanaka, my father considers you a sensei, a master. Our company would like to enter into a permanent partnership. We want to offer you a 20-year exclusive contract. We will again increase the price per pound, and we would like to fund the construction of a processing facility right here on your farm. Temperature-controlled storage, a modern cleaning and sorting line, a packaging facility to your exact specifications. It will ensure the quality is perfect from the moment it leaves the soil to the moment it reaches our chefs." Kenji agreed. The Tanaka Sato facility was built the next year, a modest, clean, efficient building. It hummed with quiet purpose. Kenji hired a small, local crew. He paid them well, with benefits. He bought another 100 acres, cash. He used it to plant a buffer zone of native trees and wildflowers, a sanctuary for pollinators. Frank Miller watched it all from a distance. He saw the new building go up. He saw the fancy trucks with Japanese lettering on the side. He heard the rumors of the prices Kenji was getting. It didn't make sense to him. It violated every rule of farming he had ever known. It was too small, too niche, too perfect. He lived in a world of volume, of economies of scale. Kenji had created an economy of quality, of patience. And Frank, for all his experience, for all his good intentions, he simply could not understand it. He held on to his certainty. He told people, "It's a bubble. It will burst." He waited and waited. The bubble never burst. It just got bigger. Until the day he sat in his kitchen, with that magazine in his hands, and the cold, hard truth of the numbers on the page. $80 a pound, a 20-year contract. He hadn't been wrong about the co-op. He was right. The co-op had no market for those beans. What he had been wrong about was bigger, more fundamental. He had been wrong about Kenji. The reckoning came in 2013. It did not come with thunder and lightning. It came with the quiet desperation of a balance sheet. The Ag Pro Co-op was in trouble, deep trouble. 2 years of drought had hit the corn yields. Global commodity prices for soy were in the tank. The co-op was over-leveraged. The farmers who sold to it were suffering. The board called an emergency meeting. Frank Miller was there, as a retired advisor. His opinions still carried weight. The new manager, a young man with an MBA, laid out the numbers. They were grim. "We need a new revenue stream," he said. "Something high value, something that isn't tied to the Chicago Board of Trade." The room was silent. These were men who had only ever known corn and soy. Then a young farmer in the back spoke up. "What about Tanaka?" Every head in the room turned. "He's getting insane prices for those black beans of his. Maybe we could, distribute for him? Create a specialty brand. Ag Pro Select." The idea hung in the air. It made perfect sense. It was their only lifeline. All eyes in the room slowly turned to one man. Frank Miller. The man who had turned Kenji Tanaka away 20 years ago. The new manager looked at him. "Frank, do you think you could talk to him? You've known him a long time." Frank felt the weight of 2 decades settle on his shoulders. He saw the faces in the room, men whose fathers he had worked with, men he had helped get their first loans. He was their elder, their icon. He had no choice. "I'll talk to him," he said. His voice was gravel. The next morning, he drove his old Ford pickup down the long gravel lane to Kenji's farm. He hadn't been on the property in years. It was immaculate. The fields were pristine. The new facility gleamed in the morning sun. It looked less like a farm and more like a corporate campus. He found Kenji by the drying sheds. Kenji was older now, nearing 50. He was lean and weathered. He looked strong, peaceful. He saw Frank's truck. He straightened up and waited. He was not surprised. Frank got out of the truck. He felt small, old. He walked over to Kenji. He held his dusty hat in his hands. "Kenji," he said. "Good morning, Frank," Kenji replied. His voice was even, not cold, not warm, just a statement of fact. Frank cleared his throat. "I won't beat around the bush. The co-op is hurting. The members are hurting. We were wondering." He had practiced the words in the truck. They felt like ash in his mouth. "We were wondering if you would consider selling some of your beans through us. Just a small amount, to help us develop a specialty market. It would be a lifeline for a lot of families." Kenji was silent for a long time. He looked past Frank, at the fields his grandfather had first plowed. He looked at the facility built by the son of the man who had believed in him. He looked at the sky. Finally, he looked at Frank. His eyes were not angry. They were not triumphant. They were just clear, like deep water. "I can't do that, Frank." Frank's shoulders slumped. "Of course. I understand. You have an exclusive deal." Kenji nodded. "I have a contract. They buy every bean. For the next 19 years. There was another silence. Frank started to turn away, to go back to his truck, to go back and tell the board he had failed. Then Kenji spoke again. His voice was quiet, devastating in its simplicity. "You told me 20 years ago that I needed to plant what the market wanted." Frank stopped. He turned back. Kenji's eyes held him. "You were right, Frank. I did. It just wasn't your market." Frank Miller stood there, in the shadow of the building he couldn't comprehend. In the presence of the man he had so kindly, so reasonably, so completely underestimated. And for the first time in his life, he had absolutely nothing to say. He had offered advice. Kenji had built a world. The story doesn't end there, because a true legacy is not what you build for yourself. It's what you make possible for others. Kenji Tanaka never became a massive landowner. He never expanded his kuromame production beyond what the soil could sustain with perfect quality. He had enough. But he used the profits from his contract, the endless stream of cash from Sato and Sons, to create something new. In 2015, he established the Tanaka Heirloom Seed Foundation. It was not a charity, it was an ecosystem. The foundation's mission was simple: to help young farmers who wanted to grow things other than corn and soy. Farmers who had an idea, a passion, an old family recipe for a specific tomato, a rare variety of garlic, a forgotten strain of wheat. The kind of farmers who would be told no by men like Frank Miller. The foundation didn't just give out money. It provided a system. It gave grants for small-scale equipment, the kind of seed cleaners and sorting tables Kenji had to build himself. It created a mentorship program. Kenji taught them the principles from his grandfather's journal: soil health, composting, patience, and most importantly, the foundation acted as a bridge to the market. Kenji used the network he had built with Sato & Sons, the contacts with chefs and specialty grocers. He would buy the entire harvest from these young farmers at a premium price, and he would connect their product with buyers who understood its value. He took the risk away. He took the rejection away. He did for them what the co-op could not do for him. He gave them a yes. By 2020, the foundation was supporting over 50 small farms across 3 states, farms that would have gone under, families that would have left the land. They were growing purple carrots, glass gem corn, candy roaster squash, dozens of unique, flavorful, high-value crops. They were creating a new kind of agriculture, diverse, sustainable, profitable. The AgPro Co-op eventually went bankrupt. It was bought out by a multinational corporation. It became just another grain elevator on the prairie. Frank Miller lived to see it happen. He watched the local institution he had dedicated his life to fade away, while the quiet man he had dismissed built a new, stronger, more resilient one, rooted in the very things Frank had called a novelty. Today, if you go to the Tanaka farm, it looks much the same. The fields are green, the facility is quiet. Kenji is still there. His hair is gray now. He walks the fields every morning, just as he always has. But in the old farmhouse, on the kitchen table, sits his grandfather's journal. The pages are thin as onion skin. The ink is faded. His daughter, Sarah, sits at that table. She has a PhD in soil microbiology from Cornell. She came home to run the foundation with her father. She doesn't read Japanese fluently, but she knows one line by heart. She traces the characters with her finger, the worn paper soft beneath her touch. The bean remembers the soil. The journal is the physical artifact, the proof, the bridge between a handful of seeds carried across an ocean and a revolution in American farming. It is a testament to the idea that the most profound knowledge is often the quietest. The most valuable wisdom is often the most dismissed. Right now, somewhere in the world, someone is sitting in an office, much like Frank Miller's, and they are kindly, patiently, reasonably explaining to someone why their idea is impossible, why their dream is a novelty, why they should just get in line and do what everyone else is doing. That person isn't a villain. They're a gatekeeper who genuinely believes they are protecting you. The most dangerous limitation is the one that comes with a kind smile, the one that cannot be fought with anger. It can only be disproven. With decades of quiet, relentless work, with a stubborn belief in the memory of the seed and the power of the soil. If this story reminded you of someone who needs to hear it,